Hello and welcome to the 8-man hard mode The Terror from Beyond boss fight guide. My name's Hayete, and today we'll be going over everything you need to know to successfully complete the last fight in the Terror from Beyond operation. For this encounter, we suggest you bring a standard composition of 2 tanks, 4 DPS, and 2 healers. Any class composition will be more than capable of beating this fight. Alright, now let's discuss the DPS requirements for this fight. This fight is effectively split into 2 different phases. Phase 1 has 2 different enrages. 1 timed and 1 mechanic-based enrage. For this part of the guide, I'll be covering the timed enrage. The mechanic-based enrage will be discussed shortly. The timed enrage is based off the tunneling tentacles, which will be discussed here in a bit. This enrage duration is 1 minute and 30 seconds. As you'll alternate this timed enrage ideally 3 times, the following analysis is based off of this scenario. Here, the individual healths of all enemies are annotated, along with a multiplier denoting the amount you'll face of each during Phase 1. From this total health figure, a standard analysis was done. Due to a period of inactivity as the fight is initiated and each subsequent tentacle phase happens, the 90-second enrage time was adjusted to 87 seconds to account for this delay. The adjusted DPS total was determined using a 1500 DPS figure allotted per tank for a total deduction of 3000 DPS. Phase 2 is much easier to analyze, as it has a traditional enrage time that starts as soon as you enter the phase. The enrage time for Phase 2 is 9 minutes. Using this enrage time, the following was calculated using the same methodology as Phase 1. The same total DPS adjustment was factored in concerning the tanks as in Phase 1. So let's dive right into the mechanics. There are quite a few mechanics for this encounter. Being that this is around a 9-minute fight from start to finish, it makes sense. So let's get started. Number 1. Tunneling Tentacles. These adds, as mentioned earlier, are what governs the timed enrage during Phase 1. These adds have a frontal cleave called Slam that outputs a large amount of damage to those caught in front of the add. Number 2. Acid Spit. This is an AoE pull that occurs approximately every 10 seconds after the first. Any player standing in this will take large amounts of damage over time. Number 3. Void Disturbance. This mechanic animates as a vortex with swirling orbs. When picked up by a player, this will increase damage done to nearby enemies, and additionally deals a small amount of damage to the player every 1 second. This buff lasts for 18 seconds. Number 4. HYPERGATE Beacon. As soon as it spawns, this add targets a random raid member, and will start a 10.5 second channel. During this channel, the tethered player will be pulled towards the HYPERGATE. Once the player is within melee range of the HYPERGATE, they will die instantly. Number 5. Unstable Larva. The adds spawn approximately every 30 to 35 seconds. These adds maintain a buff called Unstable, which forces the add to target the player currently targeted by the tentacle. If the add reaches the player targeted, it will explode violently, doing a high amount of damage. Number 6. Birthing. This is a 3-second channel conducted by the boss itself. At the conclusion of this channel, 7 birthed larvae will spawn in a 180-degree arc around the boss and will move towards the outside of the area. If any player attacks or gets within 40 meters of these adds, they will burrow underground and resurface on the player, exploding violently, doing a massive amount of damage. Number 7. Tunneling Tentacles buff. This buff maintained by the boss starts at 8 stacks when the fight is initiated. Once the boss loses all stacks, the boss will auto-enrage. More detail on this mechanic will come during strategy explanation. Number 8. Slam. The boss itself will slam, causing high damage and a knockback to any player caught in the slam. More to come on this mechanic shortly. Number 9. Grasping Tentacle. These adds have quite a few mechanics associated with them. The first is Slam. Slam is a 4-second channeled attack directed at any player standing on the platform it resides. This attack does large amounts of damage and occurs every 18 seconds. The second is Hypergate Alacrity. This is a stacking buff gained by the tentacle for each slam completed. This buff reduces the channel time on slam by 0.25 seconds per stack up to a maximum of 10 stacks for a reduced 1.5 second channel time on slam. The third is a 3-second channel called Creating Anomaly. This spawns a HYPERGATE anomaly ad when completed. This occurs at 75% and 25% HP. Number 10. HYPERGATE Anomaly. These ads once spawned will occupy a random platform on the outer edge of the area and do damage to any player on that platform. After 30 seconds, this ad will additionally start to pulse, hitting any members on adjacent platforms. Number 11. HYPERGATE Irregularities. This is a 30-second channel initiated by the boss itself. As the channel starts, 8 irregularities are spawned throughout the area. These ads do constant damage to any player on its platform. After 30 seconds, all irregularities will activate and do damage to all raid members every 1 second, no matter their location. Number 12. Scream. This is a 4-second channel by the boss that does high damage to its current target once complete. Additionally, this applies a 2-minute debuff called Faded Reality, which increases all damage taken by 200%. Number 13. Phasic Spitpool. This ability is applied by the boss to the platform of the player currently targeted. This looks and acts the exact same as Acid Spit from Phase 1. Number 14. Phasic Spittle. This is the boss's standard attack during Phase 2, and occurs every 1 second towards the player currently targeted by the boss. Number 15. Furious Tantrum. As the boss loses all grasping tentacle stacks, it will stop all mechanics except Phasic Spittle. The boss will randomly target and attack group members and do damage to all members on the platform occupied by the targeted member. So those are the main mechanics you'll encounter during the fight that you'll need to be aware of. Let me now show you how to form all of that into a working strategy. To start, let's cover how to set up your group before initiating the fight. Since you'll be facing 2 tentacles during Phase 1, you'll want to split your group in half. One group containing a tank, 2 DPS, and a healer should commit to each tentacle. So before I explain where to position your group, now would be a good time to stop and explain the slam by the Terror in more detail. The boss will periodically slam the ground, sending a wave of damage down the selected path struck. This diagram here represents the lanes you'll want to avoid when fighting under the current tentacle configuration. So understanding that, let's get back to how to position. You'll want to push your DPS into this location, in reference to the tentacle, and you'll want your tank standing here. Your healers should propagate throughout this area here. This will help direct the tentacle cleave and keep your DPS and healers out of the slam zones. Additionally, more often than not, the healers will be targeted by Acid Spit. This is not a guarantee, but increases the likelihood of them receiving it. As the HYPERGATE beacon spawns, you'll want to have your DPS attack it immediately. These are possible locations the beacon can spawn. We suggest having each side's DPS handle the beacon if it spawns on their side, and if in the middle, have either ranged DPS engage it or designate melee players to take care of it. Depending on the strength of the DPS, this ad can be soloed. However, it's best to put 2 DPS on it to burn the beacon quickly. At max range, the beacon will pull the tethered player to within 4 meters in 4 pulls. If the selected player is closer than that, then you'll have less time. Generally, these beacons pull healers, and since healers should be on the outer parts of the area, you'll generally have a good amount of time to kill the beacon. Prior to the beacon, the Void Disturbance buff will be available to acquire. If you do not need extra DPS, ignore this altogether. If, however, your DPS is low, it may benefit you to pick this up. Shortly after the beacon, 2 unstable larva ads will spawn and start heading for the tanks. Have DPS split and kill these off, similar in style to the beacon. It is also possible to solo these ads with high enough DPS, but having both DPS attack their specific side's ad will give you the best chance of keeping it away from the tanks. In the event that the DPS are unable to kill it fast enough, your tank should stay away from the ad. Tanks can either kite the ad around or use a defensive cooldown and let the ad explode. Either method is fine, and if extra DPS is needed, we suggest letting the tank use a defensive and keep your DPS on the tentacle. If you choose this method, ensure your tank moves at least 5 meters away from the DPS so they do not take any damage from the unstable larva as it explodes. As tentacles are killed, the boss takes damage. To maximize this damage taken, you'll want to ensure that both tentacles are below 10% HP before you kill one. If this is done, the boss will take between 17 to 19% damage per pair defeated. To progress to Phase 2, you must get the boss to 50 HP or less. Additionally, due to the tunneling tentacles stack buff the boss has, you have to do this in 4 sets of tentacles or less, otherwise the boss will auto-enrage. For each tentacle pair defeated, this stat count will reduce by 2. The fastest way to get the boss under 50% HP is to push tentacles when both are below 10% HP. We highly suggest having your tanks call out percentages and coordinate DPS between the two. If done properly, you'll only encounter 3 tentacle pairs before moving into Phase 2. After each pair of tentacles are killed, the boss will begin the birthing mechanic, and will spawn birthed larvae. Simply have your group move to an open area and avoid these ads. The best method is to move to the outside of the area where the gaps are at their widest. If an ad happens to aggro a player, that player should immediately use a defensive cooldown and call it out. Healers should start triage on that player to help mitigate the damage. If you're a stealth class or a sage sorcerer, do not stealth out or use force barrier. Doing so will cause the ad to leave you and randomly select another player. The only time we suggest doing this is if taking damage from the ad would otherwise kill you through your defensives. In this case, let your group know what you're doing, and other group members should be watching for who it goes to. That player should then follow the aforementioned procedures to mitigate incoming damage. You'll rinse and repeat this process 3 times if tentacles are pushed below 10% properly, at which time you'll be ported up to Phase 2. As a side note, ensure no member moves within 4 meters of the boss itself. If so, that player will die instantly. As you begin Phase 2, there is some pre-planning that should take place prior to pulling the fight in regards to positioning and specific mechanic assignments. First, let's start with some general information on the area itself. The area consists of 17 total platforms which can be navigated to by rings positioned along these platforms. Entering a ring will propel the player down to the platform adjacent to and in the direction of the ring. The entire phase will take place with players navigating between these platforms. For the purpose of instruction, I'm going to number these platforms from 1 to 16, with the starting platform referenced as home. During this phase, every member will be under a debuff called Captured in the Void. This effectively extends the maximum range of all healing, shielding, and resurrection abilities. Position-wise, you'll want healers to maintain on the home platform. Since this is the highest point in the area, you will not suffer line of sight issues while healing here. On top of that, because of the Captured in the Void debuff, you'll be able to heal all members no matter their location from the home platform. Be aware, however, that certain heals will not be usable while on this platform. Placement heals will not be usable beyond their effective ranges, as well as Wandering Mend and Roaming Mend. Placement heals can be laid down on the home platform and affect other players, however, you'll just be unable to directly activate it through your raid frame as you normally would. Tanks will want to position here at platforms 1 and 8. DPS should gather on platform 10 to start. This is the immediate setup to move into as you start Phase 2. As you move to position your group, the boss will need to be immediately picked up by one of your tanks. On platforms 9 and 11, grasping tentacles will be spawning. Ensure your DPS wait until these tentacles are lying on the platform before engaging. If they move to these platforms early, they may take damage from the slam as the tentacle grabs onto the platform. We suggest having all DPS attack the same tentacle. This will help control DPS and, more importantly, anomalies. As mentioned during mechanics explanation, anomalies spawn at 75 and 25% HP on each tentacle. If you split your group and push these down together, you run the potential of having 2 anomalies spawn together, which is bad. Putting all DPS on one tentacle will ensure you have a bit of breathing room between anomalies spawning. So while I'm on the topic of anomalies, you'll need to designate a DPS to handle these adds. Anomalies will spawn in a random location but only along platforms 1 through 8. We suggest putting a DPS capable of high burst on these. This player will effectively intercept these anomalies for most of Phase 2. In between anomalies, this player can attack the boss itself. Due to the HYPERGATE Unity buff, the boss takes 75% reduced damage for most of the fight. However, since you'll be unable to aid in killing the tentacles, this will help put damage on the boss and help you proc abilities which you can use to burst down anomalies. Tanks will need to contend with both Scream and Phasic Spit pulls. As the boss starts to channel Scream, the other tank not currently holding the boss's attention will need to taunt. This ability does a large amount of damage, so healers should be ready to bring the tank back up quickly. Guardians and Juggernauts can use Saber Reflect to completely mitigate this damage, and Shadows and Assassins can Resilience or Shroud to mitigate the damage. Because of the Faded Reality debuff, you'll need to ensure this tank swap happens, otherwise you'll quickly lose the affected tank. The tank with Faded Reality will need to move back to the home platform to remove this debuff. Prior to Scream, the boss will drop a Phasic Spit pull on the tank's current platform. Tanks should move to platforms 12 or 13 depending on what sides they're on when this happens. In the event that an anomaly spawns on a platform affected by a spit pull, you'll have 2 ways of handling it. If you're about to kill the second tentacle and will have it dead within 30 seconds from the spawned anomaly, you can ignore it. If this is not the case, you'll need to let your healers know and move to engage it using defensive cooldowns as needed to mitigate damage. Once both tentacles are defeated, irregularities will spawn on multiple platforms. We suggest splitting the platforms into areas of responsibility and assigning these areas to each member of your group. Tanks should kill the irregularities on platforms 1 and 8. Healers should kill the irregularity on the home platform. We suggest assigning your 4 DPS as follows. 1 DPS cover platforms 2, 3, and 4. Another cover 5, 6, and 7. Another cover 12, 14, 15, and 16. And the last cover 13, 11, 10, and 9. Doing assignments will ensure that you do not overcompensate on one side and fall behind on the 30-second kill time. We suggest assigning your anomaly DPSer to either 2 through 4 or 5 through 7. If, for example, this player is assigned to 2 through 4, and as the mechanic is pushed is on the 5 through 7 side, make sure this is called out to the group. It makes no sense to have your anomaly DPSer run all the way around to the other side, when they can just DPS the side they're on, and the original DPS for those platforms can take the anomaly DPSer's assigned platforms. After 30 seconds, any irregularities alive will start to pulse, doing a good amount of damage to your group. 1 or 2 of these is healable, but if you have a lot of irregularities active, healers will quickly be overwhelmed. Once all irregularities are defeated, 2 tentacles will spawn on platforms 14 and 16. Other than the difference in tentacle location, you'll have all members move back to their prior positions and repeat the same process. After these tentacles are defeated and irregularities are defeated, the third set of tentacles will move back to platforms 9 and 11. Again, follow the same process until the tentacles are defeated. As the third set of tentacles are defeated, the boss will enter into its Furious Tantrum mechanic. When this happens, all group members must find their own platform. Since damage done during this mechanic affects all players on a platform, you do not want players grouped on the same platform taking damage together. Tanks at this point should taunt swap with each other to ensure the majority of attacks happen to themselves and not the rest of the group. All DPS should attack the boss and push out as much DPS as possible. There is one consideration to make note of when pushing into this part of the fight. Unlike the first 2 set of tentacles, when the third set is defeated, anomalies and spit pulls will not disappear. Do your best to have all anomalies defeated before pushing into Furious Tantrum. Once the boss reaches 3% HP, the fight will be complete. So that's the fight, guys. I know that was a huge amount of information to absorb, but once you see the fight and get some practice with the mechanics, you'll see it's a fairly simple fight. Just make sure to hold off killing tentacles in Phase 1 until both are below 10% HP, and during Phase 2 coordinate who is going where for irregularities. Those are the two mechanics I see messed up the most on this fight. So if this video helped you, please feel free to pay it forward and help us by dropping us a like and subscribing. If you have any questions, suggestions, tips and tricks, or think of something I may have missed, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. So until next time guys, take care and enjoy the fight.